Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, I've been reading a lot lately about how traditional recruitment methods actually promote bias and how technology can solve that problem. And also, in this period of economic uncertainty all around the world, there is also the importance of maintaining a long-term hiring strategy to achieve sustainable growth, particularly in a changing market. That is more important now. But again, also how technology can create a more equitable and efficient job market that benefits both organisations and job candidates by connecting them with the best match for their individual needs or goals. So today, I've invited Malcolm Burenstam Linder from a company called Alva Labs to talk about all this and also explore the role of AI in recruitment and how it can assist in making the process more candidate-centric. And if we have time, also discuss why companies that base hiring decisions on data rather than personal opinions are actually recruiting with better accuracy, higher diversity, while also reducing employee churn and improving performance. And it's that crossover and how technology is bringing people together rather than creating a divide. That's the sweet spot I want to head towards today, and hopefully you will join me. So buckle up and hold on tight, because today I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Stockholm in Sweden, where Malcolm is waiting to share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. Great to be here. Really looking forward to the chat. So my name is Malcolm. I'm born and raised in Stockholm, Sweden, where I'm also currently calling in from. A little bit about myself, married, father of two, third baby on the way. And since 5 years, also now founder and CEO of my company Alva. So as for sort of my personal life, I'm in the perfect storm, if you will, between building a family and building a company at the same time. So at times, too little sleep, but lots of fun and really exciting time of my life, I think. And as I said, right, 5 years working and building Alva. Super briefly on Alva, we're a candidate assessment platform that provides recruiters and hiring teams with more data-driven insights and ultimately to make more sort of confident and efficient decisions in all stages of the hiring process to really deliver like high quality hiring decisions, but also a high quality candidate experience. So really we're obsessing about how we can build and design the smoothest possible hiring experience, but at the same time really capture what's the essence of a particular role and a candidate and make that match as well as possible.
You made it sound so easy there, though. You're building a family, building a business, solving a real world problem. You make it all sound so easy. But I'd love to find out more about how you got to where you are now. So can I ask that you share your origin story, where your passion for tech might have came from, or just a moment that might have put you on this path you're on today, where the worlds of recruitment and tech would collide for you? I feel there's got to be a story there.
Sure. So I think from quite early days, I've been quite intrigued by entrepreneurship, like building companies, and maybe at that time less about tech specifically, but rather the entrepreneurial experience. So I founded my first company during university, which is now 12, 14 years ago or something like that. A company called Eventbook. We did a B2B event and conference booking platform. So really a problem that was spurred from me and my friends trying to book a venue and arrange our graduation party, which was a hassle and really hard to sort of find and realize how to do it and how to go about it and really what sort of providers and venues were available, and that ultimately was really low tech and hard. So we set out to solve that, which ultimately then pivoted into a more B2B targeted service. And that was my main experience from my university years. My bachelor program was spending time in the school incubator trying to get this off the ground. Really exciting and fun experience, and I think a good time and place to make all the mistakes. And we did if not all, but a lot of mistakes all across, and ultimately sold that company to a small peer. So by no stretch of the imagination a big exit, but rather something that could at least in some shape or form continue living after sort of we left. So that was my first experience, which I think I got really hooked by, having an idea and trying to get that from 0 to 1. And since then, I've been more or less like pulled into early stage. So after university, I ended up ultimately working for 2 different companies before I now founded Alva. The one startup, scale-up, fast-growing e-commerce company in the Nordics called Furniture Box, selling furniture and home decor online. So competing with the IKEAs of the world in terms of price point. And this was like 2013 when online, at least in the Nordics, at least in this segment, was quite immature. So we had a really good timing and a really exciting fast growth journey for a few years. And then I went on to work on the other side of the table for a private equity firm, but also now venture fund, EQT Ventures, for about 2 years. So working in the venture team, meeting and investing in early stage companies. And I think these two experiences, the common denominator, and that's where it sort of led to Alva, was really first in the scale up at Furniture Box. The biggest challenge I had sort of building out that team was really hiring. And I felt we did so many mistakes and were really clueless about what we were actually looking for and what we needed and how to ultimately then assess candidates towards that very abstract or vague role description, if you will. And I ended up doing tons of bad hires, which I think ultimately hurt, performance, culture, and we really had to sort of fix our mistakes way too often. And that doesn't also lead to a good candidate experience as well, right? So that was my key takeaway from sort of building out that team from 5 to 80 people over the course of 2.5 years. But that at the time was really my thinking was that was a Malcolm issue, that I was quite green and inexperienced straight out of uni, and obviously maybe many of the mistakes were due to my lack of experience, but I think after a few years on the other side of the table, it felt more as these Malcolm mistakes or challenges were actually more systemic or like common challenges across really any company from startup to scale up and beyond. And that's where I found myself thinking about that problem a lot more and ultimately so much I couldn't stop thinking about it. And that's why, and that's when I ultimately decided that I had to go and do something about it. And that's really the origin story from where we started.
I love that. And you really had to evolve over the years because the world has changed so much in the last couple of years. I mean, 3 years ago, most people were recruited and onboarded online and starting their new role without meeting any of their colleagues in person. And we are seeing more and more of that. There's more news of distributed teams, etc. So obviously that path led you to Alva Labs, which is using tech to make that candidate assessment better for everyone. And I think that candidate assessment role has been on an incredible journey over the last few years. So can you tell me more about the story behind the company and the problems that you originally set out to solve with technology?
Right, exactly. So our mission really is to create a job market that is fair and efficient for all, like really saving recruiters and candidates both time in the hiring process, but also really ensuring that everyone has equal opportunity to show their full potential. So I think it's really a problem of optimizing that matching, right? How do you get the right person in the right role as quickly and efficiently as possible, and making that experience enjoyable for all. And I think the big pivotal change that's been going on for quite some time but really that we're trying to drive as well is really this idea of we have this slogan that we use sometimes, hire people, not CVs. I think the status quo, the old way of doing this is you had a very strong conviction or idea about, I need to hire for this particular role. And that means that you've done X, Y, Z before, maybe at a very particular company. You only want to hire people from Google or Uber or whatever that might be, or ultimately that CV that you deem successful and that you think represents that future sort of high performer and the change maker in your company. And that can very well be true, but what research has shown and proved for many decades really is that that's a quite shallow way to think about potential and who has the sort of right ingredients to be successful in a role, and ultimately leads to suboptimal and very biased decision making. You're really limiting yourself to a set and small sort of candidate pool, also a smaller pond where many are fishing. So I think there's really exciting, which we're seeing now with, as you mentioned, right, distributed teams and remote work, that the talent pool is now global. Then you also really need to think about what are the signals for a candidate for who's actually likely to be successful in your company in that specific role, both from a sort of skills behavior and experience behavior, but really also as a person, right? In terms of soft skills, like do they have the right behaviors and traits to fit your culture and do well? And then we really need to sort of scale the onion and get one layer deeper and understand sort of the underlying traits and tendencies of a person. And that's where we really started out. So the core of our product up until quite recently has been centered around psychometrics. So how can we evaluate personality and problem-solving skills, which are the strongest predictors of success, regardless of exactly which education you've had, if you worked in a particular role or not. So that's been a very constant success full sort of signal for hiring decisions. So we've really tried to take what's best from research, codify that, and with sort of technology made the experience of collecting that data, i.e. the candidate experience going through these assessments, a lot more enjoyable, a lot more faster, but at the same time then yielding sort of output and decision support to a recruiter or a hiring team so that they can make much faster decisions, but also a lot more objective and data-driven, and ultimately leave then the judgment on top, the human judgment, right, for the final decision to the hiring manager. And now we're gradually sort of building out more tools to support the entire recruitment process. So really understanding, measuring what matters in every step of the way, and be super intentful with what you actually need and what success looks like in this role, and then being very diligent about picking the right method for the right data point or assessment criteria, if you will, and then making it easy to sort of combine and collect that information into a sort of succinct score of likelihood to succeed, essentially. So I think there's in our world there's a lot of science and research that goes into the product, and then obviously technology to make that come to life and usable.
And in recent years, AI has often had a bad rap when it comes to recruitment for promoting bias or removing people from that candidate process just because they haven't got the right qualification and doesn't even look for other human qualities in a candidate or transferable skills, etc. But just to put that to one side for a moment, can you tell me more about the problems in traditional recruitment methods and how they promote bias? Because bias is not a new problem here, is it?
No, exactly. I mean, that's really in the cornerstone, and I think it's important to be very humble about that hiring is really hard, and it's not a perfect science and will never be. There's so much noise as well that's really hard to capture, and probably will be for quite some time on all the context and nuance between all the different interdependencies between managers, peers, company culture, the actual role, how that's going to change over time. So there's a lot of noise and things that might be impossible to predict, and then you really need to then focus on what is it that you can actually control. What are the more constant inputs to that decision? And I think, to go back to your point, like traditional recruitment, I think that, again, as I mentioned before, I think the status quo, the old way of doing this, is really centered around the CV, right? What is it that this person has done before? And the way we've typically gone about that is that you, as a recruiter or hiring manager, you know what you like. You maybe have done X number of recruitments or hires before in your career, and you've started, you think, to see a pattern of what you think is good and not, which might be true, but might also be survivorship bias or complete randomness. So you're starting to introduce criteria which might not be predictive at all, just random, and you're ultimately allowing yourself to also take into account things that does not matter at all, and gender, race, ethnicity, background from whatever, education, etc. And that is really where the human mind struggles a lot to decipher what is it that makes me want to go with CVA instead of CVB. And that's where I think technology can really help to be much more mechanical and objective in picking the data points that actually do matter.
And a big theme of this Daily Tech podcast is how technology works best when it brings people together. And on that side of things, how would you say your technology replaces bias and aiming to create something fairer for all? And do you have any examples that you can share, or just help people understand what you're trying to do here and how you've successfully done this with some of your clients?
Again, right, I think hiring is hard and will be. And the way we think about the ideal solution for this is not replacing the human, but rather understanding what is it that the machine does and will do a lot better than the human, and what is it that we want to optimize for in the human's role in the hiring decision. So how can we sort of elevate the human decision making on top of much more structure and objectivity? So back to what is it that we're really looking for in this role, and how can we make sure that we're not hiring and making decisions on gut instinct just because someone also plays golf. Is that why this candidate goes to the next step, or is it because they have the real underlying traits that do matter for this role? So how we see it is how humans and technology comes together is really by building the tooling to make sure that you pick up on the key signals and the key objective data points in the recruitment process, helping to combine that evaluation and ultimately give you a sense of role fit, so that you as a recruiter, as a human on top, can then take that into account and then overlay your human judgment. But then you've also made sure that the early steps of the hiring process has been mechanical and the same for all candidates. I think that's also a key point, which you see when you don't really have any structure and just go about the hiring process a bit random. You will, on the back end of things, see that out of 5 candidates, they've had 5 very different journeys through your process. Might have had different interviews, been asked different questions, then obviously had very different conversations. maybe have more or less touch points, and what does that then do to your ability to make a objective decision making. So really, I think it's about marrying structure and objectivity and having the machine do the things that it does best, and then really giving you, as the human, the tools to make that final decision making. So we don't think about this as creating a black box AI model where you just like put in people and out comes your hire. That's not how this is going to work in the end, because ultimately this is a process of building trust as well. So the hiring team, your manager, and the candidate really need to trust the method, trust the process, and ultimately both feel that on the other end of this is going to work out. This is going to be successful. And I think that's a key point also. One very interesting finding in research is that quite a large extent of hiring success can actually be explained by the manager's sort of beliefs in that this particular candidate will be successful. How that then translates into the behaviors that the manager might do in the beginning, give you extra attention in your onboarding process, etc. So all of that boils down to you need trust, and that's why technology needs to explain why it's given certain recommendations or scores. It can't be a black box.
100% with you. And I've always felt that recruitment is like building a relationship and ensuring candidates and employees are a good fit and their goals align, just like in any human friendship or relationship. So on that side of things, how do you think technology can create a more equitable and efficient job market that benefits both that organization and the job candidate by connecting them with the best match for their individual needs and goals? Because that's what it's all about, isn't it? That's where we need to get to.
Exactly. No, I think one key thing that we believe in is really prioritizing the candidate experience. The candidate for us is really the key main stakeholder if we have to decide. We believe that both as a software tool, we believe the sort of successful path for us is really to make the candidate the champion, make him or her shine and really be able to showcase her full potential, and that's ultimately also translatable, I think, to the company. The company in the long run with the best candidate experience will have a competitive advantage in the war for talent, as you say. And I think that's really a core part in making that match and that connection a lot stronger. Because really the hiring process is the candidate's first experience and flavor of the company, right? So it's really important that the candidate feels it's transparent, fair, just, and also gives the candidate a chance to explore and evaluate the company, right? It's equally, it's like a marriage, right? It's not the company picking a candidate. It's really a dance between the two for that to be successful. So yeah, I think removing all the friction and time sinks and creating a fair and smooth process is really where you can then make the most out of that human connection and ultimately be successful on the other end.
I think if we were back a year ago, a lot of people saw AI as this big scary thing that might end up replacing them. I think that is changing now, especially with the excitement around ChatGPT. People are starting to think, oh, this could really help me. It's essentially a tool. That's what it is. And people are getting their heads around that. And if we look at the role of AI in recruitment, how can that assist in making the process more candidate-centric? Because I think this is the story we don't hear enough. It's actually making it easier for people and candidates, isn't it?
No, exactly. And that goes back to my previous points as well. I think if take ChatGPT, for most, that's more of a black box. You ask a question into the chat box and you get the response, right? And how that response was derived, you and I don't know. And I think that's fit for purpose for the purpose of ChatGPT. But again, in hiring, it's really important that you design a tool and a process which is not black box. So I think that the important part is that there's like mutual trust between the candidate and the company, that the way you're going about figuring out if this is a good match or not is done in a fair, transparent, and an efficient way, where you measure things that you actually understand why they matter, and that it's done in a fun and lovable way, if you will. So I think that's the combo, is the power between technology and then making the most out of those human interactions during the hiring process. So it's not about scaling away that human touch, rather the opposite. Have humans focus on what we do well, and have the machine do what it does well. The combo is that the power in the two, and elevating that human element.
And you're right in the heart of this space. So I'm curious, are you finding that companies that base hiring decisions on data rather than personal opinions, do they recruit with better accuracy and higher diversity while reducing employee churn and improving performance? Are you seeing that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's tons of, obviously, research and stats on the front end of the hiring process, how different methods are a lot better. So, for instance, Alva's assessments in general predict job performance twice as well as the traditional CV screening. So you can cut your time spend in the early parts of the funnel with 50%. Really spending time on those candidates with the highest and sort of best likelihood of success in that company. And what we're also seeing a lot from most of our companies that we know about, at least, is really how they talk about that the sort of pre and post Alva, the candidates that they then decide to bring into the interview process is a lot more diverse and a lot more interesting, and in general a lot higher quality, but have a much larger variations in all aspects of diversity, gender, ethnicity, backgrounds, experiences. And I think that's really the power of using scalable technology and bias freeing the sort of first steps of the recruitment process. And like one example then on the back end of more performance, like one fact I mentioned, like one customer of ours, a consultancy agency, who have seen now in their sort of early graduate program that there's a 40% improvement in billable hours for junior consultants for the cohort that got recruited with Alva compared to the sort of baseline pre-Alva. So I think this is really in the one of the most important ingredients is in any company, right? How can you at scale predictably build the best possible teams? And that will have rippling effect on performance, culture, morale, and all of the above. And not to say the least, diversity as well.
And looking to the future, can you tell me more about the importance of maintaining that long-term hiring strategy to achieve the sustainable growth, particularly in a changing market and in a world of economic uncertainty? What do you see happening here as we look to the future?
Yeah, in a changing market, hiring well can be the best competitive advantage for any company. And I think in the current macro slowdown and turbulence, you might hire less, but the ones you do hire is ultimately going to be much more important than it was just 2 years ago. That's the right decision, right? And the cost of employee churn, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, is immense. And I think you're really starting to see companies paying a lot more attention to that in the current climate. So having a long-term hiring strategy and being super mindful about how you go about it so that you're sort of future-proofing that is going to be essential, and perhaps even more in the focus in sort of the current market environment as well. So as we enter 2023, a year which will likely be challenging for many, hiring will be, like, I believe, more important than ever, and really putting the emphasis on quality over quantity, making sure you maximize the likelihood to make the right decisions.
And there is a real pressure on everyone at the moment to be in a state of almost continuous learning. And as someone who is busy building a family and a business, you know all too well about this pressure, and so will everybody listening. So the question I want to ask to finish the podcast today is, where or how do you self-educate? How do you learn more about what's going on in the industry? How do you keep up to speed with things and educate yourself? Because I think that's a big challenge for everybody out there. But I'm just curious how you manage this.
I think I'm driven by learning in a joyful way. So when it's really like a pull experience. So I find myself, I read quite a lot and listen to a lot of podcasts. So I have my nightly routine is to read, and then I always fall asleep to a podcast. So that's the way I consume most of my content. And currently I'm reading a quite interesting book, early in, but Turn the Ship Around, a true story of turning followers into leaders. I don't know if you've read that book.
No, I will add that to our Amazon wish list, though. Definitely.
Yeah, I think I haven't read it all yet, so I can't really recommend it too strongly yet, but a fascinating story about a submarine captain who got in charge of a large nuclear submarine in the US, who was, by all sort of performance indicators in the Navy, rated as one of the poorest performers, and how he then, came in as the new leader without changing the team really, but turned everything upside down in how they ran the ship, and ultimately was one of the highest performers in a very short time. Like, really interesting, like, practical story about leadership, which is so far good read.
Excellent. And do you read or do you listen to it on Audible? Because a lot of people are doing that now too.
Yeah, I actually sometimes do both. So I tend to go between my Kindle and Audible for the same book as well. So I might read a chapter and then listen on the subway and go back to the book as well. So a bit intertwined.
Oh, I love that. And for anyone listening, just wanting to learn more about Alva Labs, everything we talked about today, what's the best starting point? What's your website, and how can people contact your team?
Absolutely. So you find us on alvalabs.io. We produce quite a lot of content directly there, also on LinkedIn. And I think one of the fun follows is our head of people, Nia, writes a weekly newsletter on everything hiring, and really shares her own stories, building out our team, and also hosts a podcast, How We Hire, where she's inviting and talking to really fascinating and great podcast guests from senior leaders, strategists, and really focused on their view of sort of best practice hiring processes and practices. So yeah, that's a good listen.
Awesome. I'll add all those links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. Love chatting with you today about why traditional recruitment methods promote bias and how technology can replace some of those biases, and also the role of AI in recruitment, how it can assist in making the process more candidate-centric. And I love that how you're leveraging technology to complement people rather than compete with them. I think that's what it's all about. It's a tool, and you've got that balance just right. So a big thank you for talking about all that and sharing your story today.
Thanks, Neil.
So you've heard from Malcolm today. We've discussed how technology can create a more equitable and efficient job market, and the benefits both organisations and job candidates for both organisations and job candidates by connecting them with the best match for their individual needs and goals. and ultimately how technology, in this case an AI tool, can transform recruitment by assisting in making the process more candidate-centric. I think this is something that often gets lost in recruitment. Traditionally, it was always about the business and almost telling the candidate that they're the ones under pressure and they're the ones that need to prove themselves. It's always got to be about who is the best fit for each other. Will you slot into my team? Will you help me solve these problems? What kind of relationship will the candidate and employer have? But what is the role in technology on that? It's a big question, and I'm not the guy that's got the answers. And I know Malcolm, he's working very hard in this field, but he hasn't got the answers to absolutely everything. But I know with everybody listening in 165 countries, together we have some interesting talking points there and maybe the answers. And I want to get them out of your heads and here in my inbox. And there are several ways you can do that. techblogwriter@outlook.com. If you want to send me an audio message or just a text message, just send me a direct message on Twitter or LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes. We'll keep that conversation going and I'll wait patiently for your feedback on that. But this is the end of this episode, but tomorrow we're going to come back and explore a completely different topic. And once again, I'll be asking you for your insights. So a big thank you for listening today, though, and until next time, don't be a stranger.